is is a summary of what we believe as a philosophy inside of this club, as our approach to business, and ultimately what we're doing here. Um, I could shortcut it. Let's see, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. So it's 7 words. If you take out the and, that's six. These are the three things, in my opinion, that it all comes back to: intelligence, which I will define; wealth, which you have to define; and getting what you want, which is why we got into this business in the first place. That can sound a little self-serving. I don't think of it that way. Getting what you want can mean service. Getting what you want can mean legacy. Again, all these things are unique to you as the individual, but these are the three things that I care about the most and what we talk about in this group. And I asked everybody in the room, I said, raise your hand if you identify with this word. We are all students here. That's what we're doing. Nobody in this room knows it all. Why? Because we're students of life, we're students of business, we're students of this idea of high performance. And what is it that students do? The priority is learning. Okay, but let's define what that means. Here's how I would define it. Now, of course, if you Google what is learning, it's the acquisition of knowledge and skills applied, right? I think that word applied is the most important word in that phrase, in that definition. Here's how I would describe this. It's all about these two things. It's about behavior modification. We all know that person that's like, oh, he'll never learn. He'll never learn. What do we mean when we say that? It's like he continues to make the same, he's met with the same situation and continues to have the same behavior. Learning to me is not reading a book. I mean, you've now acquired knowledge, but learning is the application of that. So I don't think you can talk about learning without talking about behavior in the same breath. They are married. Learning is behavior modification, right? And it's also this understanding of this phrase that I'm such an advocate for: valid versus useful. Learning is also the ability to take in a bunch of information and knowledge and skill sets and experiences from other people and be able to decide whether that's a valid thing or whether it's actually useful to you. The thought that I'm having right now is the idea of the shiny object syndrome. There are an infinite number of valid ways to make money, let's just say, right? Doesn't necessarily mean all of them are useful to you. And learning is the process of behavior modification, but also knowing what to not modify your behavior on. It's the filtering of that information, right? And the goal of learning, in my opinion, should be to increase intelligence. And here is a fantastic definition, in my opinion, that one that I've chosen to adopt, one that I would recommend adopting, is that intelligence is your ability to get what you want from life. I know a lot of very wealthy people who are not, quote, book smart, but they're really, really good at getting what they want out of life. Also know a lot of really smart people who are not good at getting what they want out of life. I don't know that I would not define either, that as intelligence. Not the same thing. This is the quote from a colleague of mine who I went through a program with who, gave this phrase, and I just absolutely love this. If it has increased your ability to get what you want, it has made you more intelligent. That's how I would define intelligence. How good you are at getting what you want out of life, which is a unique definition. Because intelligence is knowing that arguing with your spouse might be valid. You might be right. But how useful is that? How useful is that? You're missing the whole point of the game. The point of that game is not to be right. You're valid, making valid points. Got it. Cool. Yeah. How's that feel sleeping on the couch? If your goal so that's one example, right? Valid versus useful. Intelligence is knowing the difference between the two. Same thing with, strategic or tactical things like the actual strategies that we're all doing. Flipping houses very well may have been a valid and useful strategy at one point in time. But we live in a ever-changing dynamic world. So something that was valid and useful may not be anymore. And intelligence is understanding that. I'm not saying that flipping is not a valid or useful strategy. Not saying that. My point is these are the right questions to ask. Same thing with buying rentals. Totally valid. Totally valid. But I know a lot of people who are stuck with a lot of rental properties that now they have, a dozen or 2 dozen or 50, and all of a sudden that's no longer useful for them. Okay. Another example, technical talk. We all know that these distressed sellers, they buy based on emotions. Like everything is an emotional sale that then gets justified with logic, right? So although you might be making a bunch of valid points, here's the comps, here's the budget, this is what it's going to cost me, valid, may not be useful in you getting the sale, right? Intelligence is understanding the difference in that. It's not like how well you know the comps and the rehab budgets. Intelligence is knowing that is a valid point, but it's not useful in helping me make this sale. So goal, do less valid things, do more useful things. Very simply stated. Um, what keeps us from getting what we want out of life? Now, I'm sure I could have a massive list of all the external reasons, hardships. I mean, the list is huge of external things. This, in my opinion, is the internal stuff, the things that keep us from getting what we want. First, the certainty of misery. Like we use this quote all the time from Virginia Satir that says, most prefer the certainty of misery to the misery of uncertainty. To shortcut that, to kind of shorten that up and give you my takeaway, I would say that I would describe that as we have a tendency to stay in situations because we're comfortable, even though they're not serving us. Relationships, tactical things, subscriptions on your P&L. Yeah, misery might be kind of an overstatement of that. It's not always misery. It's just like we're just comfortable. We stay in situations that no longer serve us. That's the first thing. The second is high performers especially struggle with this, myself included. Oftentimes we don't define what success means because in doing so, we also define failure. And nobody wants to be a failure. So sometimes we just don't define success. We say things like, I want to have more time with my family. I want to make more money. That's a cop out. That's a cop out. That's a fear-based thing. And we do that because our biological hardwiring is towards more. I'll touch on that in a second. But we oftentimes don't define success because we just default to more. Can't win that game. Third thing, there is a gap, said all humans, between our actions and our intentions. You ever said something to somebody you didn't mean? Action intention gap. I didn't mean it, but you said it. What is that? This shows up all over the place. I'll talk about that in a second. Number four is a reference to the barbell. We just make bad bets sometimes. We make bets that do not give us an advantage. It's medium risk, medium upside. This isn't a presentation on barbells, but that's also something I see that contributes to us not getting what we want. We just make bad bets. Number five, we got too many things going on. System reliability says the more things that need to go right, the less likely it all is to go right. It's why when you have 10 priorities, that's not as good as having two or one, right? The more things that need to go right, the less likely it all is to go right. So this is a case in point for simplicity and being really clear on the things that matter. Number six is that we just have a tendency to solve the wrong problems sometimes. We solve problems in the wrong order, and action on the wrong things at the wrong time is still wrong. So like how we direct our action to the right things at the right time is a skill set of intelligence, knowing what to focus on when. Most of the time, it's things that are uncomfortable. That's why we avoid them. So action intention gap. There's a gap between my actions and my intentions, says all humans, right? So we intend to build a low stress business, but we don't do the things that we need to do in our hiring processes, and we continue to hire B players, and therefore we don't get what we want. We intend it, but our actions say otherwise. A few other examples here. We intend to be present with our family, but we stay glued to our phones at night. Little things like this. Last one is we say, we want to get back in shape, but we keep downing Reese's every single night. Paul, well, like you say you want this, but yet you're not taking the actions. Like, okay, that's not new. We all do this. This is a human thing. There's always a gap between your actions and your intentions. And I would summarize intelligence as your ability to close that gap. That's what it is. And high performers know this. They understand. I love this phrase. One of my favorite all-time phrases, windows and mirrors. The majority of the population is looking out the window. They're looking at all these external factors. Oh, well, that buyer is a pain in the ass. And that employee's not doing what they need to do. And oh, the market's shifting. The interest rates are going up. Okay, listen. External things obviously are important. We have to have a finger on reality of what's going on. We have to look out the window. Not saying that that's not a valuable skill set. I'm saying it's only half of the equation. High performers spend an extraordinary amount of time looking at themselves, analyzing these gaps, trying to understand their self. They have a tremendous amount of self-awareness. They're constantly asking the question, are my actions getting closer to the life that I want? That's predicated on understanding the life that you want, being really clear on that, and having the courage to define it. This is where high performers spend a lot of time. And what separates the pack, in my opinion, we touched on this idea of raising the floor because if our goal is to get to the life that we want to do that reliably. We want to do that like with the least amount of risk and effort. And I pointed this out. I made these kind of graphs, right? I want to point a few things out. Most of us get a lot of dopamine from this graph right here. Why? Because you have this increasing all-time high, right? Boom, boom, boom. Our monkey brains like this. We really like this. What do you notice though? Yes, I mean, it's trending, I suppose, upward, but you have these high highs, these new all-time highs, the high water marks. Our brains love that. I'm less concerned about the all-time highs. I'm more concerned about raising the floor. What do you notice about this graph? Well, you're at 60 grand, then 75, then 85, then 100. This graph doesn't have the same dopamine. The all-time high is right here at 75 consistently. But what you're doing is you're raising the floor. You're reducing the variability. You're building reliability into your business. And again, this is the type of stuff that keeps us from getting what we want because again, our monkey brains love all-time highs. We love that. And now it's like, how do I beat it the next time? It's like I liken this to like lifting weights, you know? You go in the gym, you don't max out every single time you're in the gym. What do? Take bench press, for example. Like say your max bench press is 225. All right. Well, you don't go in the next day and try to get 226. You go back to 185, 3 reps of 10. And then you get to 190, 3 sets of 10. And then the next time you max out 3, 4, 5 months later, your ceiling raises. But anyways, this is kind of a description of our approach to building businesses. Raise the floor, but no, your brain's not going to like that as much. So what happens when we don't define success? We default to more. If we can't be clear on what a winnable game looks like, we will default to more. Why? Because we are survival creatures. Our brains are survival based. We have two sides of us, the side that's meant to survive and the champion mind, which is what Dr. Jeff calls it, right? We do not want to live in this idea of survival, and we really don't want to do things like this. I want to have more time with my kids. I want to have a bigger business. I want to travel more. I want to be happier. I want to be healthier. I want to make more money. You'll never get there. Why? Because more is not definable. You'll be chasing that forever. Because this translates into I need to put in more effort. I got to work harder. I'm behind. I got to catch up. This summarizes the phrase that Dan Nicholson introduced, which is one of my all-time favorite phrases also. The idea of closer over more. Intelligence is knowing that more is not it's a survival mechanism. Intelligence has to do with getting really clear on what you want and going and getting it with the least amount of risk and effort. But here's why humans are so awesome, though. This is what separates us. This is what makes life worth living, in my opinion, is that we get to play two types of games. This is a book I'm a big fan of, Finite and Infinite Games by James Carse. And he talks about the difference between these two games. A finite game, the point of the game is to win. What does that mean? It means hitting a quarterly revenue target or raising a certain amount of money for a fund or saying, like, I only want to work 30 hours a week, 20 hours a week. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to buy this house that I want. Those are games that can be won, right? The point of that game is to win that game. We should have finite games. But this is, like I said, this is what makes being a human awesome, is we also have infinite games. The point of an infinite game is not to win. The point of the game is to play the game. How do you win marriage? You don't. The point of that game is to play that game. And intelligence is knowing the difference. This is not a game I'm trying to win. This is a game that's meant to be played. There's other examples like parenting or religion or leadership. I like this phrase. This is one I resonate with. I play business like pickup basketball, not because the point of the game is to win. Yes, I do have finite targets, finite games built in that. This is the idea of the game within the game. You can have a finite game of I want to hit a quarterly revenue target, but also like the infinite game is I want to discover what my highest potential is. Wow, that's freaking powerful stuff, in my opinion. Like that's what makes being a human awesome. Is like we have these two different sides, but we got to be really clear on the differences. Is a finite game of yours to make as much money as possible? Maybe it is. No judgment. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but you got to be really clear on that. So, reminder, you will never win a game you don't want to be in. You got to pick your games. You got to be really clear. And intelligence, that's what I mean when I describe this. What games am I playing? There's just, I just want more clients. I want to be happier. I want to be healthier. What does that mean? Is the game I want to be as healthy as possible? That's very different. I want to live a pain-free life. I'm just giving a few examples, but remember, you will never win a game you don't want to be in. Okay, last thing. You want to know the top secret hack for getting what you want? Here it is. Do less dumb stuff. I think that very well summarizes our philosophy. Do less dumb stuff. So here's how to do less dumb stuff. Grab your journal. Journaling is absolutely a trait of the high performer. They're looking in the mirror a lot. So grab your journal. Write down all the dumb stuff you have done or are doing. Write it down and then stop doing those things. Stop doing them. Like simple but not easy. Simple but not easy. This is what goes round and around and around and around. This is what high performers do. They don't get tired of this. And then repeat the process, right? And none of this is new information. None of it. We're all aware of this. But intelligence is what you do with it. It's your actions, it's your behaviors. That's intelligence. That is a summary of how I would describe the club's philosophy on how we approach life and business. All right. That's what I got, Frank.
That was good. So let me ask you a question. What's some of the dumbest stuff you've ever done?